The Roman Empire must have peaked out, say around 200 AD, under Trajan. And afterwards it took for a long time until it collapsed. In the Western world, around the year 500, Western Rome disintegrated and, was no longer relevant. But it's interesting that Rome stayed as a relevant city in the world because of the church. And the Eastern Empire actually lasted another 1,000 years, until 1453, when the Ottomans took it over. So I think it will go faster with the Western Empire because the conditions have deteriorated considerably. In just 40 years, you take after the Second World War, the West, including America, was still the leading power in the world. I wouldn't call them nowadays the leading power. Britain would not be able to go to China and force the Chinese into handing Britain over the Hong Kong Island in perpetuity and have to pay an indemnity of several million silver coins. When the foreign ministers of Britain and Germany, especially Germany and France, travel to India and China and tell them about their stories about democracy and how these countries should behave and so on, the leaders of these countries, they laugh at the clowns that come from Western Europe. They laugh at them. I hope in Serbia the people also laugh at these clowns. A lot of Americans are very independent and that they are in favor of relatively small government. But the fact is the government has become very big. And among young people, 70% they think that the government should do more and not less. You understand? It's a very complex issue how socialism can creep into a society the silent way. The not silent way was the Bolshevik Revolution and then, also in China, the revolution and so forth. But there are ways to bring socialism in a pleasant way to the system and that people then accept it because they are being bribed by the government. Social security is sort of a bribe. You bribe people and then they vote for you. And they vote for your policies, or you subsidize companies, entire industries, then they vote for you. And that is very negative for the free market and for the capitalistic economy. I mean, if you're interested in the subject, there's a very good book. He writes in a very heavy style. The book is called Capitalism, Socialism and Democracy. This is by Schumpeter, and he has a speech in there which I would buy the book just for that speech. He gave the speech in 1949, just before he died. He died 6 months later. And in the speech, and this is the subject of the book actually, but the speech summarizes it. He explains why a successful capitalistic economy will become socialist over time. He explains the reasons for that. And I would read that because you will understand better why the Western world is now moving so much to the left. I go back to Switzerland. I don't recognize my country anymore. And if I say my country, people will say, well, how do you know it's your country? I know it because my family is my mother's family is from a mountain village. And in the smallest part of Switzerland that originally formed the Swiss Confederation. So we have been there for a long time, so I can say our country. But someone could say, no, it belonged to the Romans for a while. Yeah, who knows? And before that, to the Neanderthals. I don't think that the socialists and communists that desire these policies, they use them, they abuse them to gain power for themselves and the parties and the programs and so forth. I don't think they'll give up. I think they'll continue. But will the entrepreneurs rebel? Maybe. But I want to give you an example. I know some people in the AfD in Germany. These are people that are in high positions. And I told them, you must get a lot of contribution from wealthy people. They say no. And the reason is that wealthy people are afraid that the socialists will do harm to them. You understand? My case, I'm a vocal opponent of socialists and communists and anything left. For me, even the right-wing parties of, say, Switzerland, Germany, are not enough to the right. I'm far more right in my economic philosophy, not so much in terms of racial philosophies that I'm not interested in, but as an economist, I'm very right and very market-oriented, very capitalistic-oriented. I think companies should go bankrupt if they're not performing, and so forth and so on. Anyway, the wealthy people, they are afraid to support the right-wing causes because suddenly the socialists who are the bureaucracy, they give you a hard time. Or the professors at university, they can give you a hard time. I have evidence, clear-cut evidence of cases. In my case, I lived now for more than 50 years outside Switzerland. More than 50 years. I'm 78 years old. I'm not in the best, let's say, earnings season of one's life. The peak earning season in people's life is usually between 40 and 55, something like that. So at 78, but the tax office of Zurich has now come to me regarding tax issues. I'm not liable for taxes in Switzerland, but I'm liable for taxes on a property I have in Switzerland. But I've always paid tax. You can't avoid doing that. The question is, did I pay exactly what I had to pay, or did I pay a little bit less, a few $100 less a year, or a few hundred more? The investigation will cost the government much more than they will ever collect from me in addition. This is socialism. Behind every socialist, there is a dictator, an authoritarian character. Socialism is not about the free market. It is against the free market. It is private property is one of the pillars of the free market. And it's a pillar of people going to work. When they have a property, they look after it. They look after the street in front of the property and so forth and so on. But the socialists and the communists, they want to take it away, and then it's owned by the government and let out to the people to use. And why? Because in that process, government ownership and leasing it out to individuals, there's a huge margin for corruption. That is what they love. The socialists are out to make money for themselves. Read Animal Farm by George Orwell. This is the pigs are the socialist leadership. I have a diversified portfolio. I own shares. I mean, you know, everybody has a different investment philosophy. I would have friends, they would say, Mark, you're crazy. We invest totally differently than you. We have Bitcoins and we have Solanas and so forth. And we have growth stocks and we have Nvidia and so forth and so on. I have always been oriented towards a large portion of my funds in fixed interest securities. Because the fixed interest market, the bond market, you can make a lot of money as a macro analyst analyzing interest rate cycles. And you can structure your bond portfolio with bonds maturing in 6 months, bonds maturing in 1 year, bonds maturing in 3 years, and bonds maturing in 30 years. So, you know, you have a lot of flexibility. Then there's the quality issue in bonds. You can buy low quality or high quality bonds. And so, actually, there are no high quality bonds left. That the government has seen to it. But so I own some fixed interest securities at all times. And you said maybe an option is to say we keep our money on deposit. Yes, I think if you can put your money on deposit now in dollars at 5%, it may not make money, but it may be the best option because other things could go down. You understand? Your friends who just talked about this deflationary bust, they could be right. I'm not saying they will be right, but they could be right. If that happens for a while, gold and precious metals will also go down, but not as much as Nvidia, the fund stocks. So we have to sort of diversify. And, you know, if we come to properties, some properties are inexpensive. You can almost get them free of charge. But I think that each person must decide these things for himself, because if you live in Serbia, you have a different economic environment than I who live in Thailand. Number two, someone living in Argentina or Brazil or Colombia and so on, he has a different environment. But in general, I would say people make a mistake by holding their assets all in one place. They should diversify. Say you're a rich man in Serbia, you shouldn't own everything in Serbia. You should own some assets maybe in Asia, not necessarily in NATO countries. That is a bit touchy. Serbians would know. And so each person has a different situation. But in general, I think that the outlook to make money in assets is bad for the next few years. The question is, the way to look at investment markets is to say, how I'm going to lose the least money under the assumption that everything goes down. How do I best navigate in a losing war? We're going to lose the war, but how do we lose the least people in this war?